But for tonight, super excited to hear this presentation on redlining in Bakersfield. I'm going to introduce again the president of the History Club, which is co-sponsoring this event, Elizabeth Diaz. Yes, Elizabeth?
Yes,
all right, so I'll turn it over to her.
So hi everybody, like you said, my name is Elizabeth Diaz. I am a history major here on campus, and I'm also the president of the History Club. And I just want to share a little bit about it, so I'm going to plug it in for those students here that I see if you guys want to join. So it's been a very fun and exciting time within our club. We have a lot of history majors, but also a lot of non-history majors, which is super cool, because one of the goals of our club is kind of to like get rid of that thing, like, history sucks, but I mean, you guys all know that history is cool, right? Yeah. And we have been a part of some campus events, like this one right here. And most of our meetings are on like speakers that we had actually all the excited to come to our last meeting. And tomorrow, which for the students here who are listening, is going to be Humanities, room 11 from 1 to 2 p.m. If you guys could join, please come. We're going to have Professor Jamal Wright, come and join us. And this is one of our projects that we are co-sponsoring with, and we also have another one upcoming on May 1st, unless I'm wrong, May 1st. It's the Norman Levan Native American and Hispanic Culture Event. I will spoil what the details are for that, because you guys are all going to be there, right? Yeah. But it's really cool stuff we have planned there. And so if you're looking to join and, grow, this is for students. You guys are just trying to get out of your comfort zone like I am right now. Or you guys want to just get involved a little bit, if you're new to the campus. I'm going to stay after if you guys want to connect with me or you guys have any questions. And I also want to thank our current members. Whoever is here from the History Club, you guys want to stand up? And you guys can stand up. And you guys and also our advisor, if you want to stand up as well. And I'm very excited to be a co-host also with Oliver Rosales. And with that, I have the honor of presenting our two key presenters. So I'm going to be reading their bios. First, we have Christopher Livingston. So he has directed the Historical Research Center at California State University, Bakersfield for over 10 years, where he has developed collections that document Basque history. Did I butcher that? I'm so sorry. Housing discrimination and the farm labor movement in California. He holds a Master of Arts degree in history from CSUB and a Master's in Library and Information Science from San Jose State University. He teaches courses in archives and special collections and oral history methods, where he exposes students to the role of diversity and power in shaping archival collections in the historical record. I don't know if you want to just wave. I should have pointed you guys out. Is Donato Cruz. Oh, yeah, this is him as well, so I'm going to read his bio as well. So, Donato Cruz holds a Master's of Arts degree in history from CSUB, along with Chris, and he provides community and student research support and resources, processes collections, digitalizes records, and helps with our yearly gallery exhibit. Donato is a specialist in the history of housing discrimination and redlining. His current projects include researching housing, urban renewal, urbanization, and eminent domain for public education. So with that, everyone please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
Everyone, and thank you for being here. One thing I should have added to that bio is I have an AA in liberal studies from Bakersfield College. So I got my start here a little late, but they say it's never too late to finish your education. Any Arvin grads in here? Do I see any Arvin? Awesome, Arvin's in the house. Good, so I feel at home. Totally at home. My name's Chris Livingston. Let's see what's going on here. Technology working. MA in History from CSUB. I did my Master's in Library and Information Science with an emphasis on archival management from San Jose State. And right out of the bat, I graduated. I was the curator of collections and the manager of the Jack McGuire Local History Room at the Beale Memorial Library. So I was recruited to come over to CSUB in 2012, and I've been there ever since. I just want a quick note here. This program is made possible through funding from the California Humanities and also Kern County Museum and the HRC at CSU Bakersfield. This year, some of you may have seen this. I know Olivia has spent a lot of time here. We call this the courtroom. This is the courtroom part of the archives. These are records documenting Kern County history, Kern County law, basically, court records going back to 1866. So that's just one kind of section of records that we have. And has anybody seen the current exhibit over at CSU yet? I know Oliver has. I encourage you to get over there and see it. We do have some examples out of this collection in the current exhibit that is related to our housing and redlining exhibit that's going through August 31st of this year. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Historical Research Center, who we are and what we do, a small note about primary source research, the nature and difficulties in doing primary source research. And then I'll turn it over to Donato, where he'll talk about redlining and American Blues in the aftermath of the 52 earthquake. Can everyone hear me okay? Good. All right, so the Historical Research Center, what it is and what we do. I mentioned that I was recruited by Kurt Asher, who's the former dean of the Walter Street Library, to come over and really just to do some moonlighting to help them get their archival program back on track. CSUB went for years without collecting any local history or even university history. And so once Kurt was in the driver's seat, he wanted to get that program back and running. And what started out as a 10-hour-a-week job turned into a three-year contract, turned into a tenure-track position. But when I was kind of negotiating or talking with him about what this archive was going to be about, my number one demand was it was going to be a teaching and learning center for students. And anybody who's done archival research, you know that there's some mystery behind it, right? There's some intimidation, right? Oftentimes the records are hard to access or even get permission to look at. And as a graduate student, I just remember being intimidated going into the archives, not even really knowing where to start, what questions to ask. And I didn't want our students to have that same experience. So, in my talks with Kurt, I told him to be a hands-on archive. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means our students get in and they can actually, go face-to-face with the documents, so to speak. They can get in there and handle them and feel them and smell them and and work with them. And they do this in a variety of ways. They do this through their research, but they also do this through internships and through their coursework. I teach 2 courses in the history department. One's oral history methods, and then the other one is archiving special collections, where students get to learn about not only how to do archival research, but also how to potentially manage archives. And what this does is it helps them, be more attuned into and hopefully comfortable in going in and researching archives. And we've had a number of students go on to grad schools and public history and things like that with some experience that they've gained through the HRC. You might notice a BC professor up there, but here's a part of a group. We went out to the People's Missionary Baptist Church back in, I can't remember the year now, probably 2016, I think, to do a community digitization project. But as I mentioned, I was recruited by the dean. As a new dean, we got a new vision, more student involvement. And then the other aspect was to expand the collecting mission from beyond just collecting university history to really looking at community histories, right? Really focusing in our backyard here with Bakersfield College, but the city of Bakersfield and Kern County, and kind of expanding that out through the Central Valley. And we like to think of this as epistemic activism. And what I mean by that is I'm not just an archivist that just waits for collections to come to me and process them in for research. I want to focus on communities that have been traditionally marginalized and bring more voice and exposure to those communities. And so we are very active in what what types of collections we bring in and we seek out. And we look to not just hold the records, but also use them in our own research, right? And try to affect change. And this talk tonight, what Donato's going to be speaking about, is kind of an example of what we do. It's not just, we're looking to affect change in our community as well, not just write about it. So as I come over, we were able to expand our space. We had about 600 square feet up on the 4th floor. Javier, you remember how small that room was, right? Had a little tiny desk, and it was just jam-packed. I was able to claim about 4,000 square feet on the 2nd floor due to some reorganization. With physical space, you also have a need for digital space expansion, and so we were able to add cloud storage, and with support from the CSU, we now have a variety of digital archive platforms that we can use to make this all of our research and our collections available not only to students but to the community. We have a digital lab, so this is where our students can come in and learn how to digitize materials, photos, documents, what have you. We can basically digitize anything. We can do anything the major companies that digitize materials have. We can do that same thing. We can do microfilm, we can do documents, we can do photos, we can do slides. We've done a couple of partnerships with BC. We digitized all of the yearbooks for BC and all of the course schedules for the historic course schedules for BC as well. And what's great about this is it's not me or Donato that's doing it, it's the students that are getting this practical hands-on experience in learning digital methods. So I mentioned the digital institution or repository. So with all of this digitization, you need a place to store it and access it. You can't just put it on a hard drive. Doesn't really last that way. We are very heavy, as I mentioned, on student involvement. So not only do we have our students in the archives doing research and learning about archival management methods or practices, we also have an active gallery. And so I mentioned our exhibit that's on display right now based on this presentation. All of our exhibits are written, designed, installed with our guidance by students. So it's our students, our gallery group students. And I would go out on a limb and say that probably not everyone is a history major in here. Also, I hope everyone would be, but you may not all be history majors. And that's fine. Over at the HRC, we have students, we've had nursing students work on the gallery group, English students, computer science, business. It's a great way to learn networking skills, to learn concise writing, and what have you. We resumed the collecting mission at the university, so it's just trying to get, we just had our 50th anniversary. That was, working with Olivia. That allowed us to really position ourselves to collect the current materials that need to be collected. And then one of the big things to this, that's really a key to the success of the HRC is we were able to embed ourselves into the curriculum at CSUB. So we have 2 courses that we teach within the history department. We do a lot of work with political science, and now with our new ethnic studies program, we're starting to gain a lot of momentum there, and we're starting to build partnerships there. So it's really an exciting time to be working at the HRC. We're really, especially with this project, we're really seeing a lot of return on this project. And then, community outreach. We do consulting with local organizations and community groups that want to learn about archiving, want to learn about the proper methods. fact, just this last week we had the Kern River Valley Museum down here, looking to see how to manage their digital collections, and so we're working with them on that. And so here's just an example of some of our students here, and they're currently working on the Monique and Michaela here are working on the next exhibit, which will be about vast arbor glyphs. And so basically the vast tree carvings that the vast sheep herders left on the trail. I've been working with University of Nevada, Reno, and Boise State to digitize those trees. And so we'll be looking forward to that. But again, they're doing all the key research here. Sam's working with processing and collection there, and so it's really a nice opportunity for students. So there's 4 components to the HRC. We have the California Rare Book Room. We don't have as many books as the Beale Memorial Library has related to Kern County history. I think there's like over 10,000 books at the Beale Memorial Library. But we do have a nice collection of local history and materials, surrounding figures like Earl Warren and Dorothy Donahoe and such, people such as that. Our oldest book is from the year 1641. It's called the Theologica Prophetica. It's a religious text that's in Latin, and so we use that. That book isn't in behind locked doors. We have that out with our students to show them how books were bound in the 1600s. They can see how images were printed, via woodcuts and things of that nature. Of course, we have the gallery. It's not just local histories. We actually expand out. We have California, things representing California history, United States history, and world history. We've got Civil War letters in that collection. We've got the Lucien Garbon musical score collection. These are musical scores written by Ravel and Debussy and Fauré. And then our oldest item is from the year 1245, which is a page out of a book, and it's a commentary on the Quran, and it's in Farsi. So, and these are things that we bring out. So, like we have our intro history classes that come in for tours in the archive and to learn, to interact with primary sources. We bring all of this stuff out so that they can, see it, feel it, touch it, smell it, and get that real hands-on experience. Of course, I already mentioned our gallery and student-driven exhibits, and of course our education program, which is not just limited to what we do with the history department. Of course, we give community presentations as well, and what we call one-shots, where we go into a class and talk about, what types of sources might be available for, a specific topic. This is an example of one of our oldest documents. That's a Spanish will from 1641. That's on vellum. So vellum is like it's usually either sheepskin or deerskin or maybe even calfskin. And you can see there's some water damage to it. Happened. I'm not sure how the water damage came to be, but the biggest mystery is we don't know why we have it. It's in Spanish. It's 1641. It's it's really kind of remarkable. We know a lot about the person whose will it's for. His name is Pedro de la Parra. Javier helped us out with some of the translation, but we don't know how it got from Seville, Spain to Bakersfield, California. And I always ask students, when they're looking at primary sources, who's the intended audience here, right? And I always tell them, I can guarantee it wasn't for you guys in Bakersfield, California in the year 2024, so. But anyways, but what is your primary source, right? So it's material that contains first-hand accounts of events, was created contemporaneous to those events, and later recalled by an eyewitness. And this is kind of an official definition from the Society of American Archivists. And why am I talking about this? Why are primary sources important because we can't just make things up, right? We have to, we need evidence to support our arguments, right? One of the things about this, the housing and redlining topic is we expect some pushback because it does get into racism and other uncomfortable topics. And we didn't just make this stuff up. We went and looked at the documents, and these are the stories that documents are telling us. And Donato will share a lot more of that here as we go on. So the purpose of the primary source, right, is the building blocks of history, right? That's how we know what we know about history. It provides us information. Hopefully it's factual, but it can be misleading. People are people throughout time, right? And images, need to be looked at in a favorable light, right? You want to go down in history. If you're a famous person, you want people to look back at it and say, hey, he did something good, right? But things can be misleading, and it doesn't necessarily have to be intentional. It can also be because of omission, right? So I always tell my students, when you go in and you're looking at these documents, you got to ask what the document's telling you, but you got to also ask, what is in here? What's missing from this conversation, and where might I find this, right? They offer original thought. They help us in understanding context. They obviously aid in supporting our arguments, and they also lead to new interpretations. Oftentimes, things come up into the historical record that and it changed the way we think of things. I'm going to share an example with you in a moment that's really relevant to tonight's talk. What are the difficulties? Well, they're hard to find, right? I don't know, Jeff, how many times have you had a student come up to you and have this really great idea for a paper, but there's just no primary sources to support it?
Yeah, I'm teaching Native American right now, so that's the case with every one of my students right now.
Right, so you're kind of,
paucity of sources.
You're stifled, right? Yeah. So that's something we got to think about. We're in the digital age, and our students, you guys are on your phones a lot. I'm on my phone a lot too, but I'm a Gen Xer, so I started off like the first paper I typed here at BC was on a typewriter. So we got some of that. So what I tell my students is that not everything has been digitized when it comes to primary sources. Now you can go to an article database, right, and find all sorts of secondary articles from journals, right? No problem. They're going to be all over the place. But while we've made some good strides towards digitization, we still have thousands and millions, probably more like millions and billions of documents. I'm talking about the whole profession to get there. You saw that the courtroom I showed you, that first slide. I mean, there's thousands of pages in there, and we haven't even scratched the surface in digitizing it. So it's going to be a while. They're difficult to access. In Donato's research, he went up to the National Archives to access some housing records related to Kern County, and the government shut down. And they, I think it was a couple weeks before you could actually get up there to access them. Sometimes you get stonewalled. Another example, we went to the housing authority, and they just didn't have the manpower to help us find what we needed, even though we knew exactly what we wanted to look at, right? So you get stonewalled sometimes. Sometimes the condition of the artifact doesn't let you get in and handle it. So you might have to settle for a digital version, but there may not be a digital version, so you may be stuck without looking at it. Often incomplete, they don't tell the whole story. Some collections, this is actually a big problem. There are a lot of private collections out there, and I think that's even more true when it comes to local history. And if you don't know the person, one, you may not even know they exist, but if you don't know the person, you may not be getting that access, right? And so it's important that we try and identify those private collections. There could be language barriers, depending on what language it's in, or it could be an old dialect that doesn't, that you need some specialized training and able to understand. There's also costs. So we never charge our students or our faculty, and generally local people we don't charge, but we have a researcher from outside, we charge them for our time. So if we're looking for, they call us up from Michigan, and they want a copy of this file, we charge them for that time. It takes us the time out to do that. And the fees aren't uniform. They vary from archive to archive. And in flat out denial of access, you might encounter that as well. So I kind of mentioned this. What is the importance here, for discussing primary sources for this presentation? And that's, we're looking at restrictive covenants that are on the books still at the Kern County Hall of Records. Any of you guys can go down there and pull these up. You're going to see some examples of the language. We found blood purity clauses in some of these records. It just kind of stifles me because, growing up, I grew up in Arvin. Growing up here, learning history. You always hear the comparison to the South. The South, it was, de jure segregation. There was laws that made segregation. But here in California, it was, more de facto. It was kind of softened. And what we're seeing, that's not necessarily true. We're seeing codified language in documents here in Kern County, in our own backyard, that are saying the opposite. We have a photo in our exhibit that the sign says "No colored trade allowed." It was taken here in Bakersfield. So finding these documents, these photos, it's bringing a new interpretation to the narrative, right? We're getting a new interpretation and new viewpoints of the narrative. And I'm going to leave you with this case study here. Claude Blodgett, he's kind of from a prominent family here in Bakersfield. He was a real estate, I guess like a broker. He owned a lot of properties and what have you. I get a call one day, and this happens a lot. You get a call on a collection. Hey, I've got this collection. Do you want to take a look at it? I get a call from the museum, the Kern County Museum, and they said, we've got this collection in the storage facility across from the museum, and the family wants to get rid of it. We don't want it. You might want to take a look at it. So, I think it was like a Saturday that I was able to get down there to look at it. And I get down there like early in the morning, and I'm meeting the family because they're getting ready to we're either going to toss it, give it to you, and then we're out of here. So, so I start going through this storage shed, and there's, you see mice and roaches and all sorts of stuff. And I start just sampling records because there's no way I can go through the whole thing and make a really good decision. And the first book I opened was like ledgers with just numbers, and I'm like, this is not promising. And then I go over here and I pick up a record and I open it up and I see Mayflower. And I didn't have to go any further. I said, that's it, I'm taking it. And she's like, you don't want to look at it anymore? And I'm like, no, because I know Mayflower is Bakersfield's segregated community. And I know that that's something that's going to bear fruit. And at the very least, if it doesn't, then I can get rid of it, right? So I was able to save it. And so we've got his real estate practice, Sunset Mayflower area. And so, as I mentioned, the HRC, our main goal is to give students experience in collection, processing and what have you. And I had a brand new student assistant who was in the grad program and was actually on the exam track, and I put him onto this project to process, and like within a day or two, he comes to me and he says, you know what, I think I've got an idea for a thesis. I'm like, what's your idea? He says, well, I'm seeing some reference to some questionable housing practices coming out of this collection. I'm like, let's pursue it, right? And so he does, and that turns into a thesis, completed thesis. And that student was eventually hired, and he will be speaking to you next, Donato Cruz. So, and with that, I will turn it over to Donato.
And actually, I'm going to invite Gabriel to butter you up with a song. And so, Gabriel, can I ask you on that? So, Donato's going to speak in just a minute, but listen. So, last week or a couple weeks ago, I was at CCB Bakersfield for their first annual Ethnic Studies Conference. And the president was there, the deans were there, and Gabriel was there, a member of our ground staff, who was the keynote speaker. And he gives free guitar lessons at the Juarez Hall, which is the oldest Mexican mutualista in Bakersfield. And I heard Gabriel play a song called Redlining Blues. So this song that he's going to perform for you is exactly what Donato's going to talk about, but in song form. So I will turn that over to you, Gabriel, to give us a moment of levity before Donato speaks. He's going to butter you up, Donato. Sorry? There should be some out there. There's on the side.
Try to get both of these. I want to tell you about the redlining blues, what banks will do, but they want to keep out of darker hues. They take the good people, yeah man, they split them right in two, 'cause they know otherwise their hate and anger just wouldn't do, and that's how you get the redlining blues. Haviland, the first county seat, and in the first edition, states' rights and states' remedies. One nation ruled by the white man. Haviland, the beginning of the black man moves into Hillcrest, and his neighbors, man, they did protest. Some ministers took the problem and said we're Christians. Let's ask him to move on then. Mayflower, the lowest point in town, and the FHA said keep those property values down. When it came to education, he didn't have the Cresta's appreciation, and you can still smell tomorrow's grapes now.
So I'm going to start with the redlining definition. This is the New York Times by Candace Jackson, where she defines redlining more of a shorthand term to describe racially exclusionary tactics like racial steering. Racial steering is when you want to buy a property and someone says, wouldn't you like to live in this place, where they have your people or your food? And that is discriminatory. You can actually buy wherever you can afford, right? So it's come on to be a more modern kind of definition to just include different forms of racial segregation. Today we're going to talk mostly about housing and kind of urban renewal. So the condition of the housing. So this is just kind of a small excerpt from 1950s, kind of detailing the conditions of housing in Bakersfield. And here's a quote. It says, "There are no sanitary facilities whatsoever, but people having to use pit toilets whose stench is readily recognizable miles away along the alleged business district Cottonwood Road, now Lakeview Drive." That's the Mayflower Sunset District. Many Negro citizens of Bakersfield proper, against overwhelming odds, have been able to buy land and build lovely, comfortable homes. And these are actually photos from the Mayflower Sunset District. These are from the Bakersfield Californian, and these I got from the museum, kind of showing the conditions of housing. And that just kind of shows what the lived realities were in Bakersfield in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So this is a report from 1930 by the Governor C.C. Young, who was a former real estate agent himself, where they sent an inquiry to counties and asked if they segregated Mexicans. And Bakersfield reported that they did. And in the report they said that racially restricted covenants were a tactic that they used to racially segregate. Because although most of these clauses seek to restrict the occupancy of the premises to persons of the Caucasian race, in some instances, the Mexican was definitely specified as prohibited from occupancy. And from our further research here in Bakersfield that Chris and I have just completed a couple weeks ago, we found specific ones that outlined not just having Caucasian only, but also excluding specifically people of African, Mexican, and Asian descent. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of the FHA program. Have you all heard about the New Deal? Hopefully, California. So the FHA was a New Deal program during the Great Depression. They rolled it out to kind of restart the housing industry, start the home loan industry in a more regulated way. So currently the FHA is still around. The HOC Homeowners Loan Corporation, they were also created to do the same. And one of the things they did is they implemented racial segregation. And I'll give you specific examples from both. So the FHA in their manuals and even in the HOLC, they implement grading, so neighborhood grading. I have a redlining map, and I just realized it's pretty strategically, it's not placed in the best area. Anyways, who's seen the HOLC redlining maps? Is anybody familiar with those? They've come on the news quite a bit, and they're taught, I think, more often. So Fresno has a map. Fresno has a map because they have a large enough population. Bakersfield, a lot of people have asked, well, have you found a map? Is there a map? And I've come to the conclusion that Bakersfield didn't have a large enough population to actually be drawn a map. But that doesn't mean that these practices weren't here. So this is an example from an FHA valuation where they went and looked at a neighborhood on the east side, and they did things to look at like civic centers, social and community centers. More often things neighborhoods of color did not have, right? Investment in community centers, good education, things that were more prominent in white neighborhoods, right? So this is just to show that even though we don't have a security loan map or a finance security loan map, that these practices were well and alive in Bakersfield. So now we'll get into the racially restrictive covenants. So the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, in their underwriting manual. So the underwriting manual was how they taught real estate agents how to buy and sell, kind of professionalize the industry. In the manual, they taught real estate agents to racially segregate. So here is a page from 1938, the underwriting manual, where they say prohibition of the occupancy of the properties except by the race for which they are intended. right? So they're teaching real estate agents to racially segregate in 1938. And this isn't really uncommon, especially since the FHA was, when they were forming it, the government tapped the National Association of Real Estate Boards, now the National Association of Realtors, they changed their name. They were already racially segregating. According to the historian Paige Lotzer, pretty much they had already implemented this and had what they thought was successful racial segregation in the Midwest, the Chicago area. And when they were tapped, they brought these practices with them, right, to the national stage. And that's where it really makes it really impactful to look at the 1938, 1950 era, is because they're bringing this to the national lending, home loaning stage, right? So you no longer have local real estate agents that racially segregate, you have a much larger implementation of these practices. And we get it at the home loan national scale, right? And this is from that manual, so they're teaching everyone. So here's an example of that language here in Bakersfield. And it says, quote, "No part of property shall be used or occupied or be permitted to be occupied by any person not of the white or Caucasian race, except for such persons as are engaged in bona fide domestic employment of the owner of thereof, of those holding said under owner." So this statement is also a socioeconomic statement, right? They're saying, yes, a person of color can live there, but they have to be a domestic servant, right? So this is a socioeconomic and also segregation language, right? So, but this is really also unique to Bakersfield, right? I mean, maybe not at the stage that it was between 1938 and 1950, but before 1938, there's an advertisement from 1909 from the Bakersfield Realty and Building Company, where they say they would racially segregate. It says, as well to members of the Caucasian race. This is as early as 1909. And looking at deeds, we found some as early as 1924, where they also say the lands herein conveyed shall never at any time be sold or rented or occupied by any person not of the white or Caucasian race, right? But this is not at the scale that comes after 1938, right? So this is much more smaller. So this is also looking at the professionalization of the real estate agent, the invention of the quote-unquote realtor. So in the 1920s, the real estate agent was looked at as something kind of negative, something like almost like they were, taking properties from people. So the National Association of Real Estate Boards thought about the realtor, and the realtor had code of ethics, and they had guidances and they had manuals where they professionalized the industry, right? So these are examples of the code of ethics. So this is from the National Association of Real Estate Boards, 1924, and one of the articles is, a realtor shall never be instrumental in introducing into a neighborhood a character of property or occupancy, members of any race or nationality, or any individual whose presence would be clearly detrimental to property values in that neighborhood, right? So this hoards all the resources to one area, right? So when we think of generational wealth, we think of investment in one area, this really holds it to one specific race, right? And we can see here the California Real Estate Association, in their code of ethics in 1950, they have a similar clause where it says, a realtor shall never be instrumental in introducing a neighborhood, a character of property or use which would be clearly detrimental to the property values in that neighborhood. Very similar. So this is our redlining map, and this, since we don't have a HOLC map, this started with reading basically every single covenant. So I went there on a project. We were going to do a presentation with a colleague, Jesus Garcia, who's a demographer, and I went in, I sat there and I read every single covenant before we could really go pay them, because they're very expensive. They're $3 for every first page and 50 cents for every page after. So you can imagine, so Chris and I had just come back 2 weeks ago, and we spent about $820 to print about 200 of them. So very expensive. So at that time I could only afford to read. So this was very So, but the interesting thing is that it's starting to develop a lot more analysis, right? So who knows here that George Bush Sr. lived here in Bakersfield briefly, right? So this is in the neighborhood that he lived. It's the Mount Vernon tract. It was a white-only tract, right? And we all know Mayflower Sunset. Do you know that area? So where MLK Boulevard is, and the intersection of Brundage, and I think the other street is, I'm can't remember now. It's MLK. It's the one on the back. I forget what it's called. But it's right. So if you know the intersection of MLK and Brundage, that's kind of like where the neighborhood's at. And this is it right here. You can kind of see it right here. So the interesting thing is that we found a covenant there where a white real estate agent built a black-only area at that time. And that was Elmer Harpy. And what he did is, as they were building these new suburban neighborhoods, and I'm sure people wanted to live there as well, he went and built the black-only neighborhood, right? And this is, according to Johnny Mae Parker, a local historian and activist, she says this is the start of white flight, where white residents that did live in Mayflower and close proximity of Sunset left this area where it became primarily Hispanic and black, right? So we can see right here that even in close proximity of Mayflower, there are white neighborhoods, right? And that seems to start a different change, right? And then we're also going to talk about urban and rural. So here's Bakersfield College. As you can see, it's kind of like really close to all the white neighborhoods at that time. And it gets moved. Who knew that Bakersfield College was moved? So I think when you mentioned that, everyone's like, I don't know, it was moved. I thought it was always here, right? So Bakersfield College used to be on the campus of it's Kern Union, which now is Bakersfield High School. And after the 1952 earthquake, they see enough investment in East Bakersfield to relocate to Panorama.
Leonardo, before you read the map, just for those students who can't see it, can you explain the color scheme?
So the color scheme is, we have a better map, and I think you've seen the other one we have on Google. So this one's just looking at the times that the tracts, the neighborhoods were built. So the orange are some of the older neighborhoods, and they were re-subdivided. That means they went back and they built over older neighborhoods, or at least dirt lots, and they submitted the covenants later. So even though these are from like the 1800s and early 1900s, the covenants are most likely from like the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So they went and added race restrictions after the fact, right?
So the red would be the newest.
Yes, at the time, yes. So between 41 and 50. So we can see between this 12-year period, we have a huge expansion of Bakersfield, right? You see a lot of building of what I'm starting to realize is like, at that time, the new East Bakersfield, right? And you know, at this moment, it's kind of hard to realize East Bakersfield's been here for a while. At that time, that was an expanding new East Bakersfield, considering that East Bakersfield High was a WPA project built, I think, in 38, right? And then after that, right before that, it was the moving of the hospital to the east side. So it's basically the big urban places at that time are in the 20s, the hospital, and then in the 30s, it's East High, and then after that, it's the college, right? So we see that expansion east, right? So, but I'm trying to save some time so I can take you through the website and walk you through some of our newer maps. So, in 1948, there's a Supreme Court case, Shelley versus Kramer, that doesn't strike racially restrictive covenants from the record. What it does is it tells people that you can no longer take them to court to enforce them, right? So that doesn't really change racial segregation. In Bakersfield, they taper off. They stop being published, at least what we find right now. In 1950, this is 2 years after Shelley versus Kramer, right? And we really don't get lasting change until 1968 with the Fair Housing Act. And before that, the Run for Fair Housing Act, the first Fair Housing Act in the nation that came out of California. So this is just to show that, you know, there was challenges to the use of racially restrictive covenants. And this is that Mount Vernon tract. It's hard to see, but this is the clause right here. So the question is, with racial segregation and no access to home loans for people of color, how did they buy? So they bought on this process called buying on contract, which who's familiar with like rent-to-own practices? You know, where we pay a little bit, and then if you don't pay, they get to keep the rate. They get to take it away from you. So back then, that's how you bought. You went to the real estate agent who most likely owned the house, owned the property, and also was your bank. So you can imagine how much abuses come from that practice. So this is a contract. This are those documents that Chris was speaking about, the Claude Blodgett records. So these are all records of buying on contract, right? And this is, who knows St. John's, a church on the east side off of Brundage. So this is John Wilborn, who founded that church, and we found his records in there. And we were actually able to meet with his grandson, and he was able to see those records and see his grandfather's signature His name is Ron Magsby. So we were able to work with him to kind of learn the history of it. Actually, I didn't even know we had this until he told me the story. We got to meet with him. And then later, when he came to let us digitize some records, we went through them and kind of like on a whim, we're like, I wonder if we could find it. We found it. He was able to see it. So as we can see the maps, the urban renewal, racial segregation, Bakersfield goes through an earthquake in 1952. So some of the things that I look at is what does urban investment look like in that time of racial segregation, right? So we all will remember Mayflower on the map, right? So Mayflower is right here. So this is Brundage, so Mayflower should be right here, right? It looks almost like it doesn't exist, right? It's covered up by an advertisement, there's no grids, there's nothing that shows that there's even housing down there, right? So it shows what is the priority of the city. And that's why it's titled America's Newest City, is looking at the kind of urban investment and the renaming of the city and repositioning the finance and development during the 1950s. And this is the visitor's guide during that time. Bakersfield, California, America's Newest City. It's from 1957, after the earthquake, after they rebuilt and invested millions of dollars to kind of revamp Bakersfield. We can see some of the advertisements. Reimagining Bakersfield as a suburban city. Bakersfield, a comfortable place to live. Maybe some of the statements we may not agree with, but you can see, I think some of the ones, it's like balmy summers and it's just like 100 degrees, right? So they really romanticized it, right? And this is the stadium of Bakersfield College at that time. And we can see some of the other kind of urban investment that went on during that time period. So this is Bakersfield College moves to the new East Bakersfield with the kind of the forward trajectory of what East Bakersfield was going through. So this is a map of Bakersfield College from our collection, and this is actually an excerpt from one of the yearbooks that Chris mentioned that we digitized for Bakersfield College, where it says, Easter 1956 marked the realization of a dream which extends over the 43 years Bakersfield College has been in existence. On April 2nd, classes began on the new $8 million, 150-acre Bakersfield College campus overlooking the city from the hills atop to the east. So you can imagine how much influence the East Bakersfield had at that time. Equally, how much influence later the Southwest will have for CCB to move there as well. And that's some of the things we're starting to look at as how they're investing and how they're moving and where education is going and how is it in reach to certain people, right? So we can go. So after this transition, and I'll kind of start tapering off the talk so I can show you the website. But after this, I started looking into eminent domain and the highway. So the highways were built in the 1960s. And in that, we can see now with the extending of the West Side Parkway. Has anybody driven through it? We just drove it today. So some of the things we'll look at is how many homes were destroyed, right? And is it equal to the investment, right? So in the 1960s, similar things happened. And this is an excerpt from a resident who lived there. If I can get it to play. Or not.
Are you trying to play audio?
Yeah, it was like a YouTube video, but I'm not too sure if it. You know what? I'm gonna skip.
If we wanted to, sorry to interrupt, if we wanted to, is there anything that we could see that?
Yes. So I have everything on the website, and that's why I'm trying to rush. Right? And so I will show the website. So these are some of the maps, and the most vulnerable are usually moved, especially the aging neighborhoods, which are deemed the most affordable, but also the most on the chopping block, right? And the similar thing I have here, the most modern article that I saw is that they demoed 271 homes, about 110 family unit housing units, 36 commercial structures. So later on, future historians will be looking at this as well. And then, so I'll kind of start tapering off and ending so I can introduce the website. But now there is Restorative Justice Assembly Bill 1466 allows you that if you live in a neighborhood that has a racially restricted covenant, that you can actually go to the Hall of Records and get that language replaced. And now with us trying to get the covenants printed, they also are doing that themselves. They hired a company that's going to go there and instruct the language. We've shared our research, so now they have copies of all of our research that we found up to date. our next phase is to really go and read individual home records rather than entire neighborhoods, right? So I think that'll be probably our next effort moving forward. So from here, in 2020, the California Association of Realtors, remember they were the California Association of Real Estate Boards. They rebranded themselves and kind of reimagined, still under that professional guise of realtor, right? So in 2022, they apologized for their role in avoiding fair housing and racial segregation, but they didn't really give an in-depth conversation or even an explanation, and it just tells you how pivotal and how important these conversations are, because whenever organizations like this do apologize, they don't really explain or give a full-on report to say, all right, this is what we did. And they're more obvious in the Run for Fair Housing Act, where it was the first Fair Housing Act in 1963, sponsored by Rumford, who was a representative. And they sponsored a Proposition 14, that overturned that Fair Housing Act. They call it the so-called PREA Amendment, California Real Estate Association, so it's backed by their name. So they never really tied that either, so I think their apology was kind of half empty. It was just more like, we're sorry by what you did, right? So thanks, there is a survey, but let me get you on the website, so we can show the, you
You can come back to the survey at the end.
yes.
The page is done by then.
Is it? Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So, as someone asked in the audience, we do have a webpage that has a lot of these sources. These are advertisements from 1956. And I have different examples from education, urban, eminent domain, where that video is there if you want to watch it. For the sake of time, I'm just going to go into the map that we're making. So this is the interactive map. These are all the covenants that we went and printed. I'll show you, before I get into the map, we are starting to put them into our database management, where you can actually go and click these records and read them for yourself. So here's some examples. This is from some of the tracks. So you can see, we got about 200. I think we have maybe about 10 up. So we've been working very hard to try to get them up for this talk. So, but this is more color coded. So the green I put in kind of the spirit of the HOC finance loan. That green was financeable. Red was the red line, right? Less access to finance and resources. This is the Mayflower track. And you can kind of see, at that time, Bakersfield really ends at what is, at that time, the 99. There really wasn't a 99 or a 50 at that time. But you can kind of see, like, kind of what Bakersfield really was, right? Not very big, but rapidly expanding. Later on, we'll see the jump. I think for people, who's a recent move here, who really didn't grow up in Bakersfield? Right, so a lot of people that I've spoken to, they really say, oh, is Bakersfield segregated by the 99, right? Because there's a drastic difference from changing from Stockdale to Brundage, right? So I think as we're kind of looking at this now, Chris and I have started to look at the movement of demographic and then the movement of kind of investment in neighborhoods as well. So we can see some here. The map doesn't really do justice because it starts in Bakersfield, but there's some in Lamont, there's some in Arvin, there's some as Frazier Park. There's some in Shafter. There's some in Wasco, McFarland, and recently, where Oliver was grateful enough to have us come over, Delano. We have some in Delano. And then some of these we started to look at, is it close to schools, right? And still in that same, kind of thought of grading, right? What does it mean to live next to a school? What does it mean to get, finance? And then we started to learn that, that's something that, is something they still look at, right, for kind of priority in neighborhoods. So, and this has like some of our data, like when they were submitted. Some of the early covenants that we had are uploaded here, and then we've dedicated some other ones too as well. But I encourage you to explore the website. There's a lot to look at: zoning, suburban expansion. This is the Run for Fair Housing Act. There's a lot to go through. I know this talk is Okay, we can only do like 30 minutes apiece, so you know, if I could be here for 10 days, I probably would. Yeah, still talking, right? So I'll put the survey back up, but I think this is probably a good time to transition.
Yeah, we'll do some Q&A.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can just have an open Q&A. I want to take the lead on the first question. Sure. And again, feel free to answer this.
You'll go first.
I get first. No, I defer to Tommy.
Okay.
Tommy.
Two questions.
Yes.
Are you going to talk about sundown town, because it directly applies to this? Number two, are you going to talk about miscegenation, because it came just before the 1948 law?
Yeah,
Sure
so-
about that.
So, you know, and I'll kind of, I'll go back into the map. So I'm glad you brought down sundown towns, and it's always like in the corner of the map. You know, Taft is a well-known documented sundown
That
town.
sign that was over Taft Highway.
Exactly right. I haven't been able to find a photo. I think Chris said he might have seen one at one point. We're still hunting down for it, right? And and
I know there's one out, there's got to be one. And getting back to talking about private collections, there's one in a private collection I just got that feeling, you know. But,
yeah.
because it was prominently displayed over even the Taft sign, you know.
And in 1950, the city council and then the board of supervisors passed ordinances outlawing segregated signs. So you know they exist, but they were taken down, right?
That one wasn't taken down until 1988.
I believe that entirely.
Can you describe what a sundown town is for those who may not know?
So,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
you go for it. You for it. I'm looking for the photo that. Yeah.
So it's basically was a there would be a sign oftentimes at the entrance of the town that would say a derogatory word about
Don't let the sun set
on your head, yeah. N word, don't let the sun set on your head. And so, and being that if the sun set on your head, you probably were going to get lynched or something, you know. So it was prominent across the South, but like I mentioned, you know, the practices things that were going on in the South were going on right here in our backyard as well. So,
Yeah, so
KKK was here. We do have an image of a cross burning from like what year is that? Like 1938, I think.
1924.
So 1924 here in Kern County. So that's along that thread.
So kind of follow up on the sundown town. So Taft was a known sundown town, and then that's where the Klan was mostly in the 1920s. Follow up on Alicia Rodriguez's research. But this is some of the covenants in Taft, which is interesting that if it was a known sundown town, why would they still do racially restrictive covenants? And it may have been like a traveled area, right? Like people cross by. So I think there's room for research and development in that. And equally with that, with like the photo stuff, I mean, forever I hunted down looking for any racially discriminatory signs. Like Oliver said that the NAACP kind of lobbied the city of Bakersfield to outlaw the posting racially restrictive signs. And I could not find one. And then one day I was cruising down eBay, and I was looking, and I found a description that said racially restrictive signs Bakersfield, but it didn't have any photos. So I was like, I'm gonna spend $40, I'm gonna buy it, right? And sure enough, this is the only photo that tourists took in Bakersfield. And it says, sign on roadside fountain, Bakersfield, California, 10 July 1946, no color trait solicited. So that's just because there isn't photographs in the archive or in the library doesn't mean these practices aren't true, right? And we can see here that clearly there is a photograph, and for a long time it hasn't been in a research institution. I've now since donated it to the HRC, right? So to further research, right? So I think as you bring it up, I think we'll continue to research it as well.
Miscegenation.
Anti-miscegenation? Yeah, so I think a lot of it covers, Oliver might be more familiar with Filipinos and anti-miscegenation laws.
Yeah, so the short answer, I mean, at least as it relates to housing covenants, I mean, I'm very curious about the blood purity contract language. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that, I told Chris at the beginning, I was like, oh, I read that, and he saw it, but it mostly says, like, if you're not 100% pure Caucasian, right? So it could be, references to passing, right? If you're multiracial, if you're, or if you're ethnic, but you're, light complected, right? So I think it's also efforts to, avoid, interracial mixing as well. So, or at least the fear of, right, is that if someone of color went to a neighborhood.
And it also went against white Okies too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there was this fear that the white Okies who came were not quite white, they were not quite Caucasian, they were mixed with Cherokee Indians and African Americans on the plains states. So I'd love to see that language on the website.
Exactly. I think you bring up something interesting, something complicated with the covenants too, that they also say that you can't have like a junkyard. And I feel like that's some of those associations with migrants, right? That they come with poverty or they come with things that aren't necessarily ideal in neighborhoods that they're reimagining as white, upper middle class spaces, right? So I think in some cases they are very, discriminatory with multiple phases, right, of it as well.
It looks like there's
Yeah.
a student with a hand over there.
Yes.
Hello,
Yes.
my name's Joanna.
Sure.
I had a question about, you mentioned that if people who lived in the covenant, like a racially segregated covenant, can now get that language strike. It doesn't get strike from the original, right? It doesn't
So,
it's
so
still like
from what I know is that they keep the original, right? So they do have like physical records. They also have microfilm records. I think it only gets struck, from what I understand, is from their user copy. So like whatever they digitized and whatever, let's say when you buy a home and a real estate agent does pull that record, that their user copy is striked, right? That the original record isn't being destroyed, right? So it's only and I've heard this before with people who buy homes. We just had a student who bought their mother's home from in Tulare, and he found that language in there actively, right? It wasn't struck or anything like that. Equally, I have had some colleagues who have at other universities who have started projects solely on the basis of discovering those things, right? So yeah, they won't destroy the originals, but it'd be the user copies.
A side note to that, we noticed also in the restrictive covenants that there would be, like an A to Z list of restrictive covenants, and it would be a couple down and you'd find the racially restricted one. But you'd find language next that would say, A, B, and C will expire in 1970, but D won't. D was the racially restricted one. So they were even envisioning keeping that in, moving forward. So.
There's lots of hands over
That was a quick. Okay, so I'll start here in the front, and I'll move back over here. Yeah.
Just real quick, I've heard, but I have not seen it confirmed, that there were clauses in some of these contracts prohibiting laundries in such
Like Chinese laundry.
to try to keep Asians with Chinese out.
Well, we have seen restricted
Specifically anti-Asian ones.
Asian, but that's something we'll keep an eye on.
Yeah, so I think, from original reading it, some of my projects were just like the exclusive just race language, right? But I think now as we printed them out, we have the 200 and some in our institution now. And, I think that's something that we're further looking into, yeah.
And anybody who's interested in the history of Chinese exclusion should read Gilbert Geo's work on that topic.
Real quick, just to get back to Tommy, and what we're noticing there's all these rabbit holes that are popping up, and we're going off on all of these. There is so much work that needs to be done in the history of social justice in Kern County. We're not going to even scratch the surface on some of the issues, but we are looking.
County and you.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, awesome.
There was another hand over here.
Jeff?
Yeah. Well, thank you both for talking. This was really interesting. My question was again about the striking the language from the record. Do you know what that process looks like? Because I'm thinking that'd be a hell of an extra credit assignment for students.
So
is it difficult? Is it?
So from what I know, and I don't think anybody's really done it in Bakersfield. So when it really goes with it. So to facilitate. So what I would say is we have pretty much all the document numbers. We have them all digitized. If you know someone who lives in that neighborhood that would like to take on the project, tell us the tract, right? If you live in one.
Yeah.
Tell us, hey, this is the tract. The Google. It's great because you can just type in an address and it will take you to that neighborhood. So if you want to look at your house and then be like, all right, do I live in a formerly white restricted neighborhood? From what I've heard, they only charge administrative fees, to submit the record, which is $3. It's $3 or $4 to to do it. But we have them all the copies, we have the document numbers. I pretty much will just give it to you.
Let's
Yeah, so
let's
whoever's
make a prompt for
interested.
an assignment.
Yeah. I'll facilitate anything. We just gotta print it, so even easier. We'll give you all of it.
Cool.
Looks like there's a follow-up.
Follow-up, yes.
Hello, I
Yes.
had another question. So I was wondering, I know that we're talking about the history of redlining, but I feel like it's still very like present to this day. There's like lack of urban renewal, especially over here on the east side compared to like, I've seen like the Stockdale Highway, like, or what is it, Stockdale, that street, Stockdale in California, be redone like 18 times. And I
Yeah.
like, you know, I had to evade potholes all the time over here. Like, is there research being done currently as to like the redlining currently happening?
I think yes. I mean, I think we just had that talk with Brittany Beck, right? And she looked into some of that as well. So looking at kind of like the new version of redlining on the East Bakersfield, because we started looking at some demographic information. This East Bakersfield is no longer, this isn't true anymore. This isn't, all these neighborhoods are no longer white, maybe along the country club side, but they're very primarily Hispanic and Black now. So there's a lot of like new inequalities that have come out of these neighborhoods that were previously segregated. So one of the terms that we look at is white flight, is as white demographics leave the area, urban investment leaves with them as well. So we can see that where East Bakersfield, there's been a series of articles over the years where people say, you know, we want the new Chick-fil-A, we want the new store, and you have to drive all the way to Rosales, you have to drive to the southwest. But I think there is some change happening. I think there's been some talk about like Hispanic GDP, like the buying power of Hispanics. And some of the stuff that we've been seeing was like they're gonna build a new Vallarta in like Panama and Old River, which is a shift change from like the 90s where, you know, or like at least the early 2000s where Ranch Market was like put in the east side. They're like, well, only Hispanics live there. So I think things are starting to change. I think you know, we could ask for more for sure, right? I think we haven't gotten there where we need to. And I think, you know, we have an urban planner here. Rogelio, I hate to put you on the spot, but we do have, you know, we're getting some more buy-in, right? And we're getting people who are definitely dedicated to bettering Bakersfield in different ways, right? Yes.
I have a quick question about clarifying the website.
Sure.
The green boxes, what exactly do
What's that?
they
Oh, white only.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the only black only tract is the red one. So you can see it's pretty much all of them. Yeah.
I just wanted, for students, can you clarify, what is the financial benefit, historically or contemporary, for folks who could get into the restricted neighborhood? And then what was the exclusion benefit for those who couldn't?
Sure. So I'll start with white neighborhoods. You know, it's the better schools, right? You have the pools, you have the stores, you have the hospital. I mean, you can see this is where the hospital is. I mean, like it's in a full-on white neighborhood at that time, where the hospital, you know, is not really available or even close to an area of color. This is East High right here, or where is it? Right here. So you can see it's a very, very white neighborhood right there, right? So we can see where all these resources are being reserved for a single demographic, right? So, and that also needs generational wealth, right? As people buy and equity changes, right? They get to pass that equity down to their children. We're in this area, right, where we saw that time period, we can see kind of like the home-built shack kind of look. So it's a stark completely opposite, right? There's no hospital nearby. It's close to the cemetery. Here's the sanitation district. Hard to see, but it's right there. So the sanitation district, when the Mayflower is being annexed in, I think in 1950 to the city of Bakersfield, this is where the sanitation district is. And that's where that, you know, that stark kind of writing of the neighborhood is, that you can smell that they're treating the water there, right? So it's a completely 360, right? I mean, you have a place where, you know, they're not really investing money. Yeah,
And there's also a power works on the highway, and there's also a dump, or in Kearney City dump.
Yeah, so.
And as Gabriel was singing, there were cases where you had like black middle class or Mexican American middle class who had the money to move into these neighborhoods but were prevented from doing it.
Exactly, and I think that just kind of touches on what Elmer Harpy did. He said you can have the new homes, but you got to do it in your area. You can't leave, right? And that's where we get that transformation, right? Where people did have the money because they clearly bought those new homes that in those black restricted areas, and it just, they had the money, right? But they said no, you can have it, but in your neighborhood. So they built the new homes there, right? And that's where we get that racially restrictive covenants as black only, is because people did have the capital, people did want to invest, but just it's goes back to the idea of hoarding the resources, right? They're just completely unavailable, right?
It's like,
Yes, question?
What
Yes.
surprised you most about your research?
I think I'll second what Chris told me when we were reading them. He's like, I can't believe there's that many. And I was like, wow, yeah. So after reading them again and reading them for the second time, I think it's the amount. Also, I'm surprised. When I first started, my mentor was like, you probably won't find much, right? And then it was the opposite. We found too much. and it just seconds to like something that some of us have said before, that it's the history just hasn't been written, but it's not undocumented. It is documented. And we have it here, right? And it just kind of shows that, for those who are future historians or people who still want to be involved and develop this history, there's plenty of room to develop the history. I had a student today say, well, I don't really want to cite the website because you already wrote it. I was like, you can write 100 different ways about it. I was like, just think about it differently, right? And I think it just goes that there's room to develop as well. And I'll follow up again. Yeah. Question?
Quick question. So
Sure.
the areas that we don't have green or red on here, those are the areas that you just haven't had the time and resources to look into yet?
Yeah, so this is from the initial research that I did reading them. So now that we printed them out, we've discovered about 40 or 50 more. So we just have to put them on the map, and then our next step is to really read the pre-tract era, so between 1866, the founding of the county, to 1938, so before they go on full-on neighborhoods. So we have to read individual properties to map them, right? And that, as you can imagine, I think before, at least for our records, before 1910, they're all handwritten. So you have to read all the cursive. And so as you're saying, like, it's not that they're not quite there, it's just we haven't gotten there yet. So let me, you can follow up again, and then we'll continue.
We plan to use GIS to layer maps, so you can look, well, not just years, but different social justice issues, right? So that are related, so you can see maybe if there's like an overlay of lack of access to education at a certain
death rate.
Death rate, disease rates, income levels, all of those types of layering to kind of give us a clearer picture of what's going on.
Yeah. Oh,
Are you gonna map out like the old barrios, cause like how like it was like the colonia and all that, like once you start doing more research you can see where all the little barrios were?
Yeah, so
nobody knows the boundaries.
I think some of the stuff, I don't have the link here, but some of the stuff we started doing was to look at the old, Bakersfield used to have a trolley, they got rid of it in 1942, to look at the route where public transportation was. So I think eventually we'll end up looking at all public services, ethnic neighborhoods as well, everything. So I think, as we're thinking about getting our GIS, I think we can.
You have the making of a multi-million-dollar grant, seriously.
Yeah. Oh, question in the back? Yes. Yeah, so I think I've seen some various projects. I think it's up to I'll put you a spot again, our urban planners, right? But I think some of the stuff that I've read is they want to introduce smaller new homes with big homes, so more cross economic, kind of integration, right? And that would at least increase affordability and access, right? So now currently, I think there's I've been looking for homes with my partner, and we've been looking at homes that are renovated, they're flipped, and they're like 300,000, right? And then you look at homes in the north, the northwest, right, which is like the Rosales area, they're like $100,000 more than the southwest. The same years, almost identical, right? But when you look at racial demographics, that's primarily white. right? So some of the things is looking at the research, right, and asking the very obvious question, can it be different, right? But I think in that, in advocacy as well, going to your city council meetings, going to your board of supervisors, and just reaching out to people, say, hey, I see this, how can we change it, right? And just asking questions, being here as well.
Number one, vote.
Vote, yes.
I mean, that's we need leaders in positions that will help affect change. The other thing you gotta remember is that we're talking about years of oppression and segregation, and we're not gonna do it really quick. We have to gradually unravel it. Yeah, and so, but this is probably, I was talking about epistemic activism, right? And not just collecting for the sake of collecting and let, we want to affect some change. And so, I mean, it's all on you too. You are all change makers, and so that's, I think, how we get it done.
Just one other short question. Do you all have information on the board-wide edition for Kern County, the Mexican ranchers area from 1900 times?
The track, right? Board track.
It's pre-track.
It's pre-track, but I think it's a track map.
It depends. It depends. I mean, if it's pre-tracked, then this is what Donato was saying. We're going to have to get into individual deeds and start looking at those for the lender. So it depends on that.
Is there an active project to start looking at pre-1930?
Yeah, so we just wrapped up our track area, so I think that's probably our next one.
That's our next. Yeah, that's our next step. So with this Cal Humanities grant, that allowed us to give us $820 to get the covenants.
They're fresh in our pockets, so we're still analyzing.
We can't put them down. But that's one of the next logical steps is to go the pre-tract and look. I would say back to the founding of the county. And we're probably going to get really murky the further we go back. So just given the history of this county and how it developed. So
is that Is that stuff you would give other CSUB and UC faculty access to?
Oh yeah. Well, all of our research is as we process it and get it prepped and ready, it goes up here on our website. And so, stuff that.
I mean, the physical documents, whatever you have, if it's not up there yet.
Yeah. So this is one of our finding aids for our restrictive covenant collection, and so you can go and see what documents we have, and then what you would do is you just reach out to email archives@csub.edu, or just go through our website, or we'll set up an appointment for you to come in and research the collection. So
and I've tried to put as much citations as I can. I still need to kind of finish up, but a lot of these images, stuff like that, do have citations. So if you see something that you're like, wow, there's a citation, but I don't have access to it, you can easily contact us at archives@csub.edu, and then we can make an appointment for you to see it, and if we can send it to you digitally, we will as well. So,
good question.
Go ahead.
Just really quick, is there any way UC students can get involved in helping UC students in research, even though we're not UC students?
Yeah, come on over.
We've been talking about developing some kind of archives class in the history department, so that would be the way.
Yeah. We even go beyond that. I mean, on our gallery group, we had a Stockdale High student. So yeah, you're all more than welcome to get involved in the gallery group, or in this research. Power comes in numbers, right? So yeah.
And how would you get in contact? Would you just show up hey?
No, you can send me an email. You can either email clivingston@csub.edu. I can find me on the website. Or through the archives, come to the archive site, you can call us, whatever. And then, what we do is, we'll do a little bit of training in the background of what the HRC is, and get to know what your interests are, and, we'll pair you with the project that, will help you pursue your interests. So, yeah.
Chris, how long can people visit the physical exhibit?
So the physical exhibit goes through, it goes through August 31st, And then we'll have the Arborglyphs exhibit that will run for a year, but we're going to actually move the exhibit to another area of the library. Just secured permission from our dean to do that.
This is really just a taste of what is in that physical exhibit.
Exactly. And then what we're going to be moving to is a more permanent exhibit in our gallery, a social justice exhibit. So we'll have, the redlining, the bulk of the redlining research in there, but we'll have some rotating panels that go down some other veins, right? So, but it's going to be more of a permanent exhibit. So
if you want to see a picture of the 1920s Ku Klux Bakersfield Klan, go to the HRC, or if you want to see a document excluding Mexican kids.
If you can't make it to campus, you can visit our virtual exhibit. So this is exactly the exhibit hall. This is what it looks like, and you can go in and read all the panels. If you've got VR, you could actually walk through the hallways. Really kind of, so there's our KKK photo, by the way. We've got a little bit of history of Bakersfield law enforcement, Chinatowns, all sorts of stuff there. So.
Well, that was wonderful. Let's give her a round of applause. I'm trying to keep us on time. It's officially 7:30. If you want to hang out, ask more questions to Chris and Donna, please do so. I don't know, Gabriel, if you want to play something, you're welcome to play something. Eat the food if it's still out there. Make sure you sign the roll sheet. Thank you, everybody. Take some flyers. Come to the webinar.
Okay, I'll be outside. Stand out here all awkward like.
Yeah, fine to see you. It's my freedom.
Gracias.